A new book out next week by Bob Woodward and a co-author named Robert Costa has some stunning revelations about the events of the last several months, and in particular, events surrounding General Mark Milley, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Let's go through these revelations because it's one bombshell on top of another with very troubling implications. And it's implications not just about what happened, but what could happen again. Why? Because General Milley is still the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The bottom line of the book is called Peril, is that for a time, Milley established in America a military dictatorship. He not only went around Trump, he put himself ahead of Trump. And he did this with the consent and collusion of Nancy Pelosi. Now, this seems so staggering in and of itself, but on top of this treason, there is a double treason. Namely, that Milley, in addition to making himself the commander-in-chief, let's think, in a democratic society, he's not the commander-in-chief. He works for the commander-in-chief. Milley was in charge, in effect, of the nuclear codes. He was the head of government. And on top of that, he colludes with our foreign adversary, China. He calls up the head of China, the Chinese military, and he tells them that he will warn them if the United States decides to attack. If Trump gives the order to attack, Milley will tip off the Chinese. Now, I don't even know what to say about this. I mean, it is outrageous. It is terrifying. I don't think anything like this has happened before in American history. I don't think the implications can be understated. They are huge. And I am thinking that even though the Democrats are working hard to sort of quickly do damage control here, Milley, of course, has not said a word, and the GOP has been largely silent, we can't be largely silent. We have to look at what seems to have happened and then think it through. So let's go through some of the details here. Apparently, Milley was concerned that the president, Trump, was going to, quote, go rogue. And so he summons the top generals, and he basically tells them that Trump isn't in charge, he's in charge. Quote, no matter what you're told, meaning no matter what Trump tells you, you do the procedure, you do the process, and I'm part of that procedure. And then apparently Milley goes around the room and he gets all the generals. He's taking a kind of a collective oath. Do you swear? Do you swear? Do you swear? And all these generals apparently gave their word that they would not do anything that Trump said without going through Milley. Wow. Now, Milley, in addition to this, was working with Pelosi hand in hand. And this may seem, well, obviously Milley's going through the democratic process, but no, Pelosi is the head of a different branch of government. Milley is part of the executive branch. So Pelosi says to Milley, reportedly from the book, you know he's crazy, referring to Trump. He's been crazy for a long time. Now, Pelosi here, this is not treasonous on her part. That's her opinion. She's entitled to say it. But what's interesting is that Milley goes, Madam Speaker, I agree with you on everything. So Milley's basically saying you and I together can basically sidestep Trump. We can make Trump not the president for a while. I, Milley, will be the president in the meantime. And then Milley calls General Lee, L.I., the head of the Chinese military. He goes, quote, General Lee, you and I have known each other for now 5 years. If we're going to attack, I'm going to call you ahead of time. It's not going to be a surprise. So Milley's sort of telling General Lee, you know, I can't take control of the nuclear codes by myself, but I can at least give you a forewarning. I mean, think about what's going on here. Now, question number one, how does Bob Woodward know any of this? Apparently, Peril is based on 200 interviews with witnesses and first-hand participants, documents, calendars, diaries, emails, meeting notes. The key point is that Woodward and Costa claim that they have the exclusive transcript of Milley's call, not only with Pelosi, but with the Chinese general. And that's the smoking gun right here. If they can produce those calls, and there need to be hearings, those calls need to be produced. And here's even Alexander Vindman. I don't know if you remember the Vindman brothers. These were the two guys who were militantly against Trump. And Alexander Vindman, one of the Vindman duo, even he says, quote, if this is true, General Milley must resign. He usurped civilian authority. He broke the chain of command. He violated the sacrosanct principle of civilian control over the military. It's an extremely dangerous precedent. You can't simply walk away from that. But I think it's much more than a matter of this guy resigning. This is, as I say, not just treason, it's treason twice over. And think about it. Here's Milley. You remember his testimony before the Congress. He's worried about white rage. He's going to go study about what made these people try to overthrow the Constitution. You know what? The January 6th protesters didn't have an insurrection. Milley did. They didn't have a coup. Milley did. They posed no threat to the U.S. Constitution. Milley did. And the point about Milley is he carried the threat out. He actually did an insurrection. He put himself in charge of government. So this was the real insurrection. And so here is a guy, by the way, colluding with our adversaries. Apparently, he's more eager to use force against the January 6th protest. They're domestic terrorists. You know, if Biden, to some degree, is China's man in the White House, just remember the Biden family has enriched itself greatly with Chinese money. That's their lavish lifestyle is boosted by Chinese dollars, you might say. Well, if that's the case, it doesn't seem a stretch to say that General Milley is China's general inside the U.S. military. We're facing, I think, a very perilous situation. And the only question I have at this point is what is the GOP going to do about this? This is not something you can kind of look the other way. Is the GOP itself part of this swamp? Are they in on it with General Milley? I hate to say it, but these are, for me, open questions. A lot more to come about this, but it seems clear at this point that if what Bob Woodward says is true, we had a military coup. It was a brief coup, but it existed. Trump may have thought he was the president, but there was a time in which he, in effect, was not. A general was running America, a military general. America was under military dictatorship. And that guy, the guy who did it, is still the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.